is Mihir, who I worked with right when they joined. But Mihir went through a very similar process, but from an enterprise level with Fox, diving into what their issues were with data, finding the need for the data catalog, and evaluating multiple vendors for an enterprise, and really have him talk through that entire process because it's an amazing process, an amazing setup that they did. So, Mihir, I want to turn it over to you and have you show off exactly how you approach this.
Thanks, Steven, and thanks rest of the panel and the participants. Yeah, so I'm Mihir, data manager, data governance here at Fox Corporation. Have been spending my last more than 10 years, more than a decade in data industry, playing different roles, starting from a data engineer, to architect, and now kind of leading the governance initiative at Fox. And super excited, and I'm happy to walk you through the journey which we kind of started around like 10 months before, and where are we now at, and how kind of from my experience I can help you guys to evaluate a modern data catalog. So let's kind of jump into it, right? So we'll kind of start with Fox. Most of you might know what Fox is about, but just these are the high level brands which Fox has, like Fox Sports. You all must be soccer and NFL fans, watching Super Bowl, NFL games, college football. So Fox Sports kind of help you out for broadcasting those live events. We have Tubi, which is the fastest growing ad serving free ad streaming platform, and it has more than like 50,000 movies. I'm sure like you must be hooked onto that. We have Fox Entertainment, Masters of Lego, Gordon Ramsay shows. That's about Fox Entertainment. And Fox TV station is all about delivering the local news. And Fox News, everybody knows the political kind of news channel across the globe, basically. So those are the key brands. We have several other brands, but that's what Fox kind of on a high level does. Moving on, let's kind of look at the stats, right? So we have 300 million monthly active users, 50K per second kind of data points every second, and then more than 6 million concurrent viewers. That's massive, right? So just imagine the amount of data which we're getting into our warehouse, and why we need a modern data catalog will kind of will slowly kind of answer your questions, basically, right? So having said that, we started our journey 10 months back. What kind of prompted us to look at even the data catalog solution, right? So let's go through this journey together. Now, most of the companies and some of these are the traditional challenges which every organization face, and that's what we at Fox was happening, right? There were multiple data silos. How do I get access to the data? Those were the frequent questions being asked by a business user or an analyst, that hey, who actually owns this data, right? Who is actually, how do I get access to this particular data tools? How do I trust that data? Is it, worth kind of, exploring the data set, or am I looking just, a random data set? Why are my pipelines breaking? Why are my dashboards not reflecting the correct numbers, right? These are all like standard challenges. And, you would be surprised the way we kind of identified this is we did a lot of customer surveys. We went through a lot of Slack channels. So there is a data support channel, there is a BI support channel, and people will kind of keep on answering questioning that, hey, how do I get this data? Why is what is the business logic actually defining that particular metric, right? So there were different data teams across Fox working on their own different data silos, not kind of collaborating, and then eventually resulting into loss of information. That's where we kind of thought that, hey, there is a definite need of data democratization. And to embark that journey, we started kind of evaluating catalog. So now, having understood that, hey, what are the different challenges, let's go and move on to the next step to further deep dive what was really happening inside Fox, and then kind of how we try to solve that problem, right? So you see there are a lot of like, data points and a lot of different users. We have data analysts, we have business users, we have data engineers, and then we have, executives at the top who want high level kind of, executive dashboard reporting, right? What was really happening is that we were treating our users as one and data as many. But if you think logically, it should be reversed. That's what we think, right? That data has to be treated as one, combining interconnected data sets, and users as many, right? You might have different personas catering to different needs. That's what kind of drive does basically, right? Now to fix this data problem, what did we actually do? First of all, we kind of collaborated and started identifying logical data groups and divided into these different domains basically, right? So here you see we have like 6 domains, each classifying to a particular data set. Like I might have an engagement data domain, I might have a ad tech data domain which serves my ad integration, I might have ad sales as a domain, I might have marketing, finance, and based on your organization needs, right? So that's what it kind of, we started with our data strategy, putting these different data silos, and we thought that, hey, no, that's not the right approach. Let's group them logically, bring them into a domain, and then how can we further kind of embark our journey towards our data mesh, right? So now, since we have kind of thought an approach of having that individual logical domains, how do I really tie up to the end business user, right? That's where we kind of kicked off our strategy of medallion architecture, which is nothing but you're getting raw data from source, you kind of cleanse it, you kind of transform it a little bit, put it into a bronze layer, into a normalized data model, having to very very close to the raw data basically, right? But in a much cleaner way, in a much transformed fashion, right? And next step, what we did was basically we kind of thought to, how do I aggregate this and put it into a silver layer basically, right? So it can answer my top 10 business questions. It can kind of the looker layer and the BI dashboards can kind of get hooked to the silver layer for detailed analysis, right? And then on top you have your gold layer, which is like utmost aggregated and business ready, right? That would answer the top KPIs very quickly in a denormalized fashion, and some of the executive level dashboards kind of can sit on this gold layer, right? So that's how we kind of thought of this journey, and how can we make this assets more discoverable, right? So a blended approach of semantic layer and blending with medallion architecture kind of was our strategy. But now, having looked at the strategy, how do we really achieve this, right? And that's where the same question was coming on, that hey, we need some kind of data platform which will unite all these domains into one place, right? So data catalog, now have we understood that these are the problem statement, these are how our strategy should look like, let's try to understand what does data catalog role, a key role which will data catalog play into our journey, right? So you have a broad spectrum, you have your producers at one end, you have consumers at other end, right? What sits at the center and the heart of the system is nothing but a data catalog, right? And the reason why I say is that there are a lot of data sources which we kind of integrate, right? We have Fox first party data, identity data, commercial data, different third party vendors sending us the data to analyze our audience engagement, how are different people engaging across different Fox data properties, right? Now, the really idea is to kind of, how do we kind of, as I was explaining earlier, how do we blend this into a data catalog, right? And what data catalog enables us is to have a semantic layer, first of all, as I was explaining, right? To have a data lineage. Hey, here is my source. It's getting put into a raw layer, transformed into a bronze. I'm aggregating that data, and these are my, kind of business logic across that lineage, right? So I can right away quickly point, how is my data getting transformed from source to target layer, right? That's about data lineage. Data access, right? I should be easily able to kind of access this data, truly discover with an intuitive, UI engine and a natural language search process, basically, right? And on top of it, one of the core components of data catalog, which we kind of thought was that, hey, this is not just a catalog, but it should be a governance platform as well. It should be very easy to achieve those governance objectives of having standardization, having set those policies and process, automating those metadata right within your catalog, right? And then if you look at your right-hand spectrum, which is your different business users, analysts, and engineers and data stewards, the approach I think which we took was having, let's say a business user wants to look at some of the dashboards, right? But exposing only the gold and the silver layer assets to them and highly curated assets to a business persona, as versus if you compare a data engineer, he would like to have an overview of all the assets, just to study all the pipelines, even the smallest staging tables, which we kind of, put into our catalog, right? So that's the broader spectrum covering from producer to consumer, and catalog enables us to do that, achieve that.
Hey, Mihir, I have a question for you.
Sure.
As you looked, you did the new design of your domains. You recognized that you needed a semantic layer. When you decided to do, look for a data catalog, where did that push come from? You outlined 5 key aspects of that data catalog, but was that a company-wide decision? Hey, with this new restructure, we need that semantic layer. Was it the data team that really pushed it? Where did that come from for you all?
Yeah, I would say it was a blended kind of decision coming from top, but more over from the data team, right? The more closer we got to business and understand their pain points, that's kind of prompted us that, hey, there is definitely a need. And we kind of reach out to our stakeholders, explain them that, hey, here are the existing data challenges. We did a lot of consumer surveys, customer service insights. As I was mentioning, went to those individual Slack channel. That kind of prompted us and clearly told us that, hey, there are a lot of industry challenges which you have to overcome, right? So as a media industry, there is third-party data going away, right? So we wanted to spend our time, majority of our time, into monetizing those data products rather than engaging with all these basic problems of that. How do I get to access to the data? We kind of clearly saw that hey, in order to move towards this data mesh journey and a data products, we have to have a catalog and a governance strategy of building this.
Makes sense. I'm glad that your entire team saw that. It was definitely different on my end, but I wanted to hear from Fox how you all did it. All right.
Yep. So, as I say, catalog is work with it, build it, and kind of, own it, right? So you start integrating your data sources, have your data domain teams for stewardship, and then have your business users to kind of, own that data basically, right? Just a quick summary, or kind of a high-level view of how we do at Fox. Basically, as I was mentioning, governance is not something which you can kind of, keep on telling that, hey, you have to follow this process, you have to follow this process. No, that wasn't the idea at Fox. We thought differently. And as you can see, right, at the bottom layer, we have our data engineering team who keeps on building, data domains gradually. Again, as I was mentioning, only catering to the top 10 assets and then incrementally building up on top of it, right? Once you have that data domains layer, you have your semantic layer, which is nothing but your matrix KPI, and the glossary, which you kind of, start putting into catalog. And then on top of it, you have your BI analytics team. One thing common here to observe is, which is highlighted in the yellow color, is governance is across all the layers, right? It's kind of, touching all the edge points, right from data operations and up to the BI layer. That was our kind of, key idea. So moving on, now we have understood, okay, what were the pain points? Why did we started our catalog journey, right? But I think all of you must be really excited to learn how to evaluate a data catalog, right? And that's what we are here for. So without further ado, let's kind of, deeply jump into it, right? First step, what do? We kind of, try to identify user problems, talk to them, do some surveys, go through our internal documents and Slack channels and different interactions with the business. That's how I kind of, showed you that it kind of prompted us that we need a data catalog, right? Next step was, you as a company need to define your own requirements, basically, right? You need to come up with your fundamental 3 to 4 core values and try to see if those core values are kind of, aligning with your data catalog partner, right? So that's how we started. We kind of define our requirements, and you'll see in the next slide what were the core components of our data catalog, basically.
Can I ask you, Mihir, when you went through the user surveys and getting down to that technical and business requirements, how did you cultivate all that together? Did it end up being just a giant spreadsheet that you were kind of managing? I know that from my part, that's what it was. We had a list of like 56 different things that we were looking for, but I'm just wondering, since you did all these different surveys and you have different personas, how did you take the time to really cultivate that and come up with what you're about to show us, what you're showing right now, kind of these key features?
Yeah. So I think, I think the surveys, and we kind of started putting down into Excel spreadsheet that, hey, here are the business teams. here is, we started identifying common theme across different business groups, right? So we reached out to individual business teams, identified their pain points, and kind of grouped together and defined a theme out of it, which is commonly coming, right? And that's where we thought that, hey, there is one particular theme which is coming out, and what might be the best features to first target for, basically, right? And that's how I'm going to kind of now show that what are the key component features. Now, I would say these are the 4 pillars any data catalog should have, and I'm going to explain you why do we need that, right? So let's kind of look at it. First of all, search and discovery, right? If you are starting your journey with a catalog, and as a user, if you think you need an intuitive search engine, a Google-like search engine, which will quickly kind of, tell you that, hey, here is my data asset related to, let's say, impression, or here is my data asset related to, any particular category, right? So efficient search, metadata extraction is one of the key components. Gone are those days where you kind of, take a lot of time extracting that metadata from your databases, whether it's Redshift, Snowflake, or any particular database, right? So, and your search and discovery aligns with your glossary, right? Someone should be able to understand what my key KPIs are, and that's where a glossary kind of plays a key important role. You group together all your business users, come up with those metric definitions, and then kind of, put it into your glossary, right? How do I kind of preview my data, right? So as a user, once you log into a catalog, you should be having an ability to search data or see at least the sample records, right? And that's how in my next slide, I would explain you why we think, we need a one data platform, basically, right? So we covered search and discovery. Let's move on to data access and governance, right? Now, as Steven, you mentioned, right, there are different personas, and our approach was that how can I make a tailored experience for each and every business users, right? So the idea was that when a business user logs in, he shouldn't be kind of looking at all the assets which are not, required for them, right? Should be looking at only the top 10, 20 assets, which are highly curated assets for a business user, right? That was our kind of, tailored experience, which we kind of thought of. And that's where the data access and governance kind of, plays into a role, right? How can I easily classify my data? Now, I might have some sensitive data, IP address, email address coming from different data sets. How can I kind of, tag those assets and put a masking policy on top of it, right? So these are some of the I would say, basic feature. And on top of it, with respect to data access requests, let's say I don't have access to a data asset. And if I am curious to know more about it, your governance platform should be able to route a user to kind of, navigate and then raise that access request and quickly turn around and get you the access, whatever is required, right? The third critical component is lineage and quality, which I was also discussing in my panel discussion, is that you want to understand how my data translates from raw to my staging layer to my transform layer, and what are the different transformations happening during this lineage process, right? Like how is the data traveling basically from my source to my target, right? And to align with that, building that trust factor, is critical, right? And how do I build trust, right? So we have data observability platforms which can alert on a particular asset that, hey, my data is stale, right? My data is not getting refreshed. My volume, there is a sudden spike in, let's say there's an NFL game and there's a sudden spike in volume. I want to know as a user that, hey, why do I get a sudden spike, right? So those are, and from, if you think from the operation perspective, identifying what went wrong, identifying, hey, what can be the root cause for these kind of data issues, right? And getting to know in the catalog itself that, hey, I can trust this data. I have a trusted score for this asset. Everything is kind of checked upon. This data is fresh. This data has, the expected volume. I have all my business dashboards up to running date, right? So that gives us kind of, trust factor. So, and the last not but the least, but is integration, right? That's one of the key component. With the modern data stack, there are so many data tools, right? You have different databases, you have your Looker and Tableau, you have your ETL tools, you have your ELT tools like dbt, which plays a vital role. How do I kind of interconnect these data sets into one central repository, which will truly enable your data democratization, right? So that So those are the like kind of, I would say, the four core fundamental features which everybody should look for a catalog. But having said that, these are not just the only necessary, or I would say not necessary, but these are not only factors which we should drive to for looking at a catalog, right? So now let's look at what do we need additionally in a modern data catalog.
And can I ask you, Mihir, before you move
Sure.
on, this is a
Yeah.
little bit selfish on my part, but when you looked at all of this and you broke it down into these four different categories, was there one that really stood out to you? I know for a lot of people, there are 80 different problems you're looking to solve, but was there one that you really focused on once you looked at those key features, whether it was a grouping, maybe it was data lineage? I know for myself, it was the glossary. I wanted to speak the same language as my data consumers. I wanted that Rosetta Stone. So for me in my company, one of the biggest things was documenting metrics, speaking that same language, that self-service. But I was wondering for Fox, and specifically for yourself, was there one top on your list that you went into this going, man, if it has this group of features, it'll solve 60% of what I need?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, what we were really looking for is data search and discovery should be at the top priority, right? Once you hooked on to a data catalog platform, you don't want users to kind of get away from that and just kind of search it and go to a different platform, right? The idea was how intuitively we can make the assets available at the fingertips, right? By just doing that natural language search. And to your point, definitely having that consolidated repository of business glossary is also critical, right? We don't want different definitions to be floating around with different data teams and then eventually getting lost across that definition, right? So I think those were kind of key features, I would say, which kind of yeah. So now moving on, let's look at, so we understood, okay, why do we need a data catalog? But there are a lot of factors which a modern data catalog offers and why do we need it? And I would really love to explain why did we kind of, went ahead with Atlan, right? One of our...
Before, can I ask you really quickly, Mihir? You have all the details and that's going to be great. But from your point of view, why did you choose Atlan? Like high level, if you were to explain to somebody why you chose Atlan, obviously there are a ton of details that we'll dive into, but just kind of from your perspective, what made you choose Atlan?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me begin with, one of our core fundamental feature which we were looking for and strategic move was having a one-stop data platform, right? And I was explaining in the panel, as well, hey, as a user, you come, you discover your asset, you understand what that asset talks about with respect to the metadata which has been put into the catalog. You understand key KPIs and metrics right from your glossary. You understand about your domain, what top questions does it answer, how do I really calculate this particular metric, and then you kind of navigate your, to look at dashboards right within the catalog, right? And on top of it, you have a insights, you have a query tool capability. So now once you understand your asset, you also are kind of hooked upon to query right within the platform. You need not go to a SQL workbench or a different IDE tool for querying, right? That was kind of one of the differentiator which we was looking for, and Atlan kind of clearly kind of stood out in terms of having that one data platform. The second thing is partnership. I would say out of all these four, partnership and one-stop data platform kind of were key core components why we chose Atlan. We being at Fox, we wanted someone to kind of partner with and also allow us to kind of shape that future of data governance, right? And Atlan has been fantastic so far. There has been collaboration of ideas between both the teams. How do we kind of solve common business problems, and how can we kind of be innovative, right? And Atlan kind of it built on open API architecture, right? That clearly allows us to have an extensibility across all our data stacks. I think those were two kind of key game changers.
Awesome, thank you. I thought of the same way when it came to the partnership, the open APIs, but I love hearing that from you also.
Yep. And not taking much time here, but the two key components of what a modern data catalog offers is truly activating the metadata, right? So I would say metadata is the new goal, but it also depends upon how do you kind of activate that, right? If you are having your dashboards being broken, people still don't trust your data, you don't know on a real-time basis that, hey, how do I kind of, why is my data still, right? That that itself tells that, hey, you need to activate your metadata, right from your raw data pipelines. If something is breaking, an alert should kind of quickly go to your BI dashboard or the rest of the data ecosystem and notify a user before he finds that, hey, there is some problem, we are kind of dealing with it, right? And one thing which kind of stands out with this all these modern data catalog 3.0 is bidirectional flow of metadata, right? So you kind of understand your data asset from catalog perspective, but let's say as a user I log into Looker or Tableau, right? I want to understand what this dashboard is talking about, what are the key metrics it kind of serves to, right? That's why that bidirectional flow of metadata happens when you truly enable active metadata. And last but not least, at Fox we wanted a simplified governance approach. It shouldn't be like kind of stressed upon that, hey, you have to follow this process, right? It should be seamless, it should be smooth enough, and a part of an integration journey across all the data stacks, across all the data teams. I think Atlin and these modern data catalog tools would allow you to do that thing, right? Next is, now we kind of looking at that evaluation process, we studied what are the different technical and business requirements. We kind of distribute RFP to vendors. I'm sure like everybody would kind of align with this and are aware of this process, but I kind of explain my journey. How do I kind of, did it? So we distributed RFP to different vendors, started evaluating, working with different vendors, and to just, restrict it to, as I was mentioning, allowed only like kind of partners which were kind of key to kind of partner with us and align on our core values and principles, right? So we invited 3 to 4 vendors for demo. We did extensive POC with our use cases, right? And then we kind of requested for reference calls. Last but not the least, Steven, as you were mentioning, right, like how did you come up with those features? And then we started preparing an evaluation scorecard, which I'm shortly going to show you all. So here is a sample kind of, evaluation scorecard. Again, as I was mentioning, not these features are like the only decider for a catalog, but it will give you some glimpse of it, right? So on the left-hand side, you see there are different features which I've kind of listed down: data discovery and search, compliance, data lineage, integration. How do I blend quality? How do I integrate all the rest of the analytical tools? And how do I make this platform more collaborative, right? These are the high-level features which we kind of thought of, and we decided to do a ranking system, right? So you see vendor 1, vendor 2, vendor 3. We started giving weights to each of our category and started ranking based on our POC and our use case, our kind of interaction with the customer vendor, and we came up with a score. Again, score is not the only evaluator here, but it will give you some glimpse that, hey, which vendor kind of tool stand out against the others, basically, right?
So the one thing, Mihir, I notice is obviously you have different weights for different aspects. So your data discovery is 20%. You have integration quality is 5%. How did you actually come up with those weights? Was it, hey, the different groups, all the surveys, you were able to weigh them? Was it your decision? How did you really weight those scores? I think it was something I struggled with personally on which one should be worth 20%, which one should be 5%. Would love to hear how you did that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the weight allows you to kind of, differentiate different data catalog partners across the industry. And for us, what I thought, and, some of my team members thought, was that, hey, if we pick top 2, top 3 features, which we're looking for, and, what are those features, right? So data discovery, as I was explaining, becomes really important. That's why we kind of assign 20% weightage to it, right? If we solve these 2 problems of having a governance platform and data discovery, I think we have won, I would say, half the battle, right? Definitely rest of the integration and plays a also key role, but these are the 2 differentiators. So if you look at some of the points which I mentioned, right, that, hey, can I have a support for my business glossary, right? Can I do some basic sampling or running my SQL queries onto my platform, right? How efficient is my natural language search? Am I getting lost or no? I'm getting a platform wherein I can quickly find and discover my assets, right? So that kind of made us to align and assign a higher weightage as compared to others, which kind of played a key differentiator.
One other really quick question here. I apologize on this. You mentioned score wasn't the only thing that you put into this. What else was there for you after you did this weighted score, everything of that nature? What else really played into it? Was, obviously you've talked to partnership, did roadmap, that vision really play a role? But, if for a lot of us, you can score, you can do features, but what else played a role in that final decision for you?
I think in Fox, we wanted to take a nimble approach. We wanted to simplify governance, right? And that's where we were looking for something which can enable us that, right? And I would say, having that simplicity, not kind of overkilling and, having a stress on the data teams, that kind of, made us the decision to go with one partner, basically. And as I was mentioning, like, partnership and having a one-stop data platform were the key differentiators.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mihir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. I there were a couple questions in the chat that I've been, typing away at, but Mihir, I'll just ask you live while we have a couple minutes. Your medallion architecture, right? There are some questions. I think you touched on this in one of your slides, having different personas. Maybe if you could explain how you're using Atlan to kind of separate people that need to access maybe the bronze silver layer versus there's probably a much larger group that just needs the gold layer. I think you mentioned data policies, metadata policies, things like that. Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we did was, since we were very clear on our data strategy, we started defining schemas accordingly. And we are using the power of, automation within Atlan, like writing playbooks to define that, hey, if my asset is a bronze layer, automated tagging would be applied and, a tag would be, let's say, a bronze schema, right? Same goes for silver and gold. And to answer to your other question, right, how do we kind of, thought? So our approach was having the most curated data assets available to the business users and not going, haywire and exposing like tens and thousands of assets to any particular user, right? So the approach was, hey, if I can get a gold layer view, which will answer my almost like 15 to 20 top business questions, I would just expose that. If there is a detailed deep dive analysis required, then probably, someone like analyst or business analyst, we are exposing that silver layer assets to them, right? But to the most executive levels, we are just exposing the gold because that's what they care about, right? So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, I mean, just keeping up with the chat. I mean, there's a couple questions. You've obviously gone through this evaluation, and there were other people on the list, right? Maybe focusing on specifically like open source versus, why didn't you just build this internally versus why go with something like Atlan? You mentioned it's a positive to be built on open source, but then, maybe trying to build this just purely on your own from an open source or, just walk us through that decision process.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful question. So in fact, my first journey with the catalog was starting with Amundsen, which was purely open source, right? So the idea was to build and bake some in-house product out of that open source catalog, which is Amundsen. But I think one thing which we realized was that there is always a time to market, right? You can't keep on building those features internally. You would at least need a year to kind of come up with a product. And, by that time, the industry would be have been, far ahead, right? We all of us are trying to solve some common data problems, embark our journey to data mesh. That kind of, allowed us that, hey, let's not kind of, look at purely kind of, building our own homegrown solution, but rather go with a partner, go with a vendor, which can enable and achieve all our goals, our core values, and, keep on adding new things, right? So whether it's automation coming to Atlan AI, updating those quickly, those metadata. So that's kind of, the thought process was.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've heard that in different ways, but meaning the same thing. I think the best way I've heard it was we don't want to spend time managing the platform. We want to use the platform, right? And I think when you go the build route, oftentimes you do spend more time building out the platform than you do using the platform. So that's great. Mihir, Steven, thank you. Mihir, thank you for the panel. Thank you for this awesome session. I'm sure your inbox is already flooded with questions about how you were evaluating catalogs, or do you have a sample? I think if you're attending today, we're giving you a downloadable template that you can actually use that gives a lot of the key functionality and criteria that you should be asking about, largely inspired by Steven's own RFP, inspired by Mihir's RFP, and many of the customers, probably about 200 different people that we've ran this by. So you should be able to get that template. And I just want to thank you one last time. Steven, I'm going to ask you to stick around because after I introduce this next session, I need some fun out of you. But Mihir, great to have you, and we'll chat soon.
Yep. Thank you so much.